Greetings, comrades, and welcome back to another episode of the Comrade Cast. Ended up taking off last week just to get the Kenshi video out of the gate. That's been a monkey on my back for quite some time, and I'm finally happy to be done that video, moving on to other things. But I think it's pretty obvious what we're going to be talking about today. We are going to be talking about the aftermath of the first presidential debate, this spectacular wet fart heard around the world. One of the most insane political displays I've ever seen in my life, and made me genuinely question if we are living in a simulation. We're also going to spend a bit of time talking about the Supreme Court decision, which effectively grants not just Donald Trump, but any president now and into the future, and of course, anyone in the past, virtually complete and total immunity so long as they're acting in official capacity. Just a total joke. Absolute joke, but what can you do? America's fucked, guys. It's really fucked. So without further ado, let's go over this dumpster fire. Not really going to talk too much about the debates. I'm assuming at this point you guys have either already watched it in its full or seen the very particularly damning clips. Especially during the first part of the debate, Joe Biden looked particularly weak, very feckless, completely unable to respond to or diffuse the jabs and attacks coming at him from Donald Trump. His performance certainly improved as the debate went on. Unfortunately, by that point, pretty much everybody's checked out, and they've already seen the really damaging parts. So I don't know about you guys, but I've been talking to quite a few people, obviously, who've watched this debate. And I had this feeling of total anxiety when Joe Biden opened his mouth. Like it was like watching a newbie tightrope artist trying to walk from one end to the other. And you're just have this pit in your stomach, wondering if he's going to make it from one end to the other, or if he's just going to go tumbling off into the oblivion of lost consciousness. He opens his mouth and you don't know if he's actually going to get to the end of that sentence. It is a dicey prospect. Joe Biden constantly mumbled and stammered and talked about things that didn't have anything to do with anything and couldn't really make coherent points or arguments. It was really bad, guys. It was genuinely the worst debate I've ever seen in my life. And I've watched a lot of debates in my life, and not just American debates or debates from Canada. I'm talking about political debates all over the world. I have seen a ton of debates. And this was definitely, if not the worst, absolute top 5 worst I've ever seen in my entire life. And the thing here is that Trump didn't do anything spectacular at all. This was not a particularly strong debate performance by Donald Trump. But he looks like fucking Muhammad Ali in comparison to Joe Biden because he showed up. He was the only person who showed up. It was a one-sided match. Trump doesn't do anything spectacular. He does the same old fucking song and dance we've been hearing for a decade at this point. I am the greatest. Everyone else is terrible. I did everything fantastic. Everything would be wonderful if you just voted for me. He gave absolutely nothing substantive and didn't sway anybody over to his side, really. But what he did do was give more than enough bits of meat to his base to get them excited, to get them enthusiastic, and to give him political energy. But by virtue of just being able to make a sentence, he effectively wins this debate because Joe Biden, he was a husk, man, but he was a fucking husk. I'm watching House of the Dragon right now. Joe Biden is like Viserys Targaryen, who continually deteriorates throughout the series due to, I won't say the disease for spoiler's sake. He's very obviously in bad shape. But he was like the end stages of Viserys Targaryen up there. He was fucking falling apart. And what's frustrating is that we have all seen the writing on the wall for Joe Biden for quite some time. Back in 2020, there were serious questions if he was going to be able to fulfill a 4-year term. And I talked about this before. I feel like there was a almost unwritten compact in 2020 where the feeling of that election was very much we got to get Trump out, or the predominant feeling was we got to get Trump out. Doesn't matter who it is. So I think people at that time were willing to accept Joe Biden, who very much so was not in his prime back in 2020, on this unwritten compact that he wouldn't run for a second term. And after that debate, if you think that he's got the steam and the energy to run for another 4 years, you are delusional. There's no other way to say it. So I'll say it now. He's got to go. He's 100% has to go after this debate. I've been at least hoping that he would go for a while. I was hoping he wasn't going to run for a second term. Maybe now the writing is so clear and so obvious to everybody that he just doesn't have it in him, and he's got to step aside. And he's got to step aside and let somebody else run this campaign, because it's very clear he cannot combat Donald Trump in a time when the stakes are regrettably very high, in my opinion. And there's no question at all that a second Donald Trump term, I think, would be a disaster. The guy clearly has political revenge written all over him. And if the DNC decides that they're going to stick with Joe Biden, they are handing the country over to Donald Trump for a second time. They have to accept reality that he is not up to the task. Joe Biden has to accept that reality. The question is, are they going to? I do feel like ultimately, yes, I do think he's going to go. If I'm going to put a bet on it, I think Joe Biden is going to step aside. I don't think he can recover from this, and I'll tell you why. One of the very first things that I saw coming out of this debate was that back in 2012, during Obama's run against Mitt Romney, he had a very poor first debate performance, which caused the polls to flip in Mitt Romney's favor for a brief period of time, up to the point where they had the second debate and Obama did much better. And then they had the third debate, and, it was all set in stone at that point. It's funny because there are a weird number of parallels that people are pulling from the 2012 election to what's happening now. But I remember that 2012 election very clearly. I was very politically engaged at that time. I watched all of these debates, including the vice presidential debate between then Vice President Joe Biden and, I was going to say Mitt Romney again, Paul Ryan. And we'll get into that after. But yes, I remember watching this debate clearly in 2012 and very clearly thinking that Obama had lost the debate. But this is not like then in 2012, and I'll give you a couple reasons why. First off, yes, Obama did lose this debate. He didn't lose it by anywhere near the same margins that Joe Biden lost this debate to Donald Trump. And this debate did not do what the debate between Joe Biden and Donald Trump did, which was lay bare a very clear and critical weakness with Joe Biden that the Republicans had been harping on for a long time and everybody knew existed. But when it's drastically shoved in your face like this, you have no choice to accept it. And that is, this debate revealed that Joe Biden is in serious cognitive decline and might not be able to keep going much longer. There was no circumstance like this in the 2012 election. There was no, does he got the juice to keep going? Everybody felt like, yeah, okay, there's the first debate, but back in that time, those debates happened very quickly in relative quick succession. I can't remember how long it was. I think it was like 3 weeks in between every debate. Obama had a very quick opportunity to turn it around. Everybody knew he had the ability to turn it around. Could he actually stick the landing? In this case, he did. Everybody knew he had the capability to do it. I don't think anybody thinks Joe Biden has the capability to stick the landing right now. The only equivalent weakness I could think of for Obama would be like, somehow it was found out that the whole Obama birther thing was real and they were able to definitively prove that he was born outside of the United States. What happened in that debate between Trump and Biden is the effective equivalent political damage it would have had to Obama if, that conspiracy theory was somehow proven true. But going back to 2012 and debates in that election cycle, I very clearly remember this vice presidential debate. In fact, it's one of the very few vice presidential debates I've ever watched, which I actually remember to this day, the one here between Joe Biden and Paul Ryan, because Joe Biden fucking clapped his ass, man. He decimated Paul Ryan in this debate. It's probably, in my opinion, the strongest debate Joe Biden has ever had in his political career. And it also actually ended up helping Obama, because if I remember correctly, the way it worked is you had the first presidential debate, then the vice presidential debate, and then the two more presidential debates. So Biden, in this circumstance, with his strong debate performance, was actually able to give Obama a little bit of a boost after his weak one. But you go back and you watch this debate, and it is shocking, because in this debate in 2012, Joe is confident. He's making jokes. He is on top of Paul Ryan and all of his talking points. He is good to go. There was none of that Joe when it came to Trump and Biden. The guy definitely does not look as good as he used to. He's definitely not all there in the same sense that he used to be. And to have that displayed in front of everybody so starkly, again, I just don't think he can recover. So we have some data here showing that after the debate, the amount of people saying that Joe Biden is too old to be president is widening. One poll I saw was 80% of voters after watching the first debate said that Joe is too old to be president. This is Joe Biden's key weakness, is that he is generally perceived to be too old, because Donald Trump isn't that far behind him in terms of age. It's not his age that's the problem. It's the fact that he can't keep up with mentally what's happening around him. So let's take a guy like Noam Chomsky, who is not dead yet. Reports of his death have been greatly over-exaggerated, although health-wise, I don't think he's doing too hot. But Noam Chomsky, up until this point, he is, 98 years old? 95 years old. So Noam Chomsky is 95 years old. To this point, Noam can still very clearly articulate his points, make a coherent argument, and I would certainly bet he could make a coherent argument against Donald Trump. To me, it's not that Joe Biden is too old to be president. It's just that he's not up to the task. And he's particularly not up to the task of campaigning against Donald Trump. But yeah, he's got to go, especially because now we are at the point where you cannot make a pro-Biden argument. You cannot defend Biden. You can defend him on the good parts of his record and of his past administration, but you can't really argue that's going to continue into the future given the state that he's currently in. So the only argument you can make for your political side right now is that you are not Donald Trump, and that is not a very strong position to be in, because while Trump has an extreme amount of negatives, and I do believe he could be defeated fairly easily with a strong campaign, to have a real strong chance of winning, you need to have a candidate and a vision that people can actually believe in, on top of just being anti-Trump. And right now, there's no way Biden can deliver on that in any way, shape, or form. Let's head back over to Real Clear Politics. This is the baseline I like to use. Some people like New York Times. I choose Real Clear Politics. And one of the reasons is, even though that I am a left-wing guy, I like Real Clear Politics because it has a right-wing advantage. So I know that if it's close or Biden is winning, he's actually winning probably by more than it would seem. But this lead that we have right now is definitely way more than any kind of polling error or any kind of data favoritism could account for. Right now, we have Trump leading by almost 3 points. And we just checked this in the last episode. We just checked this in our big election roundup. And those polls were tightening. Finally, it looked like those convictions against Donald Trump were having an effect on the electorate. But just at the moment when it seemed like they were going to overtake each other and Biden was going to take the lead, we have the debate and the graph line go down. Yeah, it speaks for itself. We can look at this line in front of us and see a very clear and absolute nosedive right after the debate. So in the immediate aftermath, what has been happening, we got an update. The Guardian has a really good live feed about what's going on right now. What's our newest thing here? 6 minutes ago, poll released this afternoon showed that 49% of voters would vote for Donald Trump compared to 43% who say Joe Biden. That's a 6-point lead. That is massive. Joe Biden, completely oblivious to what's going on. He's given out some posthumous medals of honor. But anyway, so here we go. This is the one I wanted here. An hour ago, second Democrat calls on Joe Biden to drop out of the race. This is Rahul Gaviera from Arizona. Again, interesting to note that Arizona is a very critical swing state in this election, basically saying that he should drop out. The first Democrat to do so was Lloyd Dogart of Texas. So now we have two active Democratic members of Congress calling on Joe to resign. Again, it's not mystery as to why someone in a swing state would be asking for Joe Biden to resign. There were reports earlier that candidates out of Wisconsin were basically saying, don't come here, Joe. We don't want to campaign with you, Joe. You're going to drag down our ticket, Joe. There's no way to say it. This is a total disaster for Joe Biden. A lot of people have been saying this will be a total disaster for the Democratic Party. Only if they continue to run Joe Biden. There are very clear mechanisms to replace Joe Biden. If you guys needed any more evidence as to why we should replace Joe Biden, the Heritage Foundation, a conservative think tank, is working on a legal case, a legal battle to prevent Joe Biden from being removed as the Democratic nominee. They want to face this guy so badly in election, they're willing to go to court to prevent the Democratic Party from choosing another nominee. I can't imagine that would actually work. What if he dies? Like, you're just supposed to run him if he's dead or something like that? Like, what if he just wants to step down? What if he says, of his own volition, I want to spend more time with my family? Like, you're just going to force the guy to keep running? You're going to force him to run? That's ridiculous. No, Joe, the court compels you to run. Compels you to run for president at this point. That would be funny. But to me, this is just more of an indication of how desperately they don't want the Democratic Party to dump Joe Biden, because Trump is extremely vulnerable. And the thing about, even if you put Kamala Harris in there, who's not a very likable candidate, not a very good candidate, the thing about Kamala is that because she is so unknown, especially in comparison to like Donald Trump, who has been a political factor for a decade now, everybody knows about him, everybody's made up their mind about him. Kamala actually has maybe 20 to 15% of the electorate who hasn't quite made up their mind on her. That's room to grow. You don't need too many of those unconfirmed and undecided people to go over and consider Kamala to beat Donald Trump at this point. And that's the huge thing, right? Is that if they put in another candidate, maybe they might not be beating Trump initially, but given enough time, given the actual offensive energy you could mount against Trump in conjunction with a candidate who is functional and there and can make a coherent argument, that will actually be a very winning strategy in my opinion. But if you go with what you have now, it's going to be a fucking disaster. Hear me now, quote me later. You run with Joe Biden, there is no way he can win this election. Anyway, we had a report come out earlier today as well, saying that Joe Biden is considering dropping out. Although at this point, Joe Biden has come out and said, no, that report is fake news. That's not real at all. Again, it's just a political disaster. I don't know how he can stay in the race at this point. There are fake reports apparently about him thinking that he's going to drop out. He's got to spend political capital defending just the fact that he should continue to exist in this race, when I don't even think he's capable of doing that at this point. And let's wrap up the show by talking about this Supreme Court decision, which came out a couple days ago, which gives Trump and any other president, of course, pretty much complete immunity. So long as it can be argued they are acting in official capacity, they can do whatever they want. And because of this obvious blank check, and let's be real, an extreme amount of authority and power you are giving the president with this, it is clearer than ever that Donald Trump cannot be allowed to reassume the office of the White House, because he can then do whatever the fuck he wants, just so long as he's arguing or can make even the vaguest of argument that he's acting in official capacity. The funny thing here, though, is that I think we've all kind of known that this is true for presidents anyway, but this is the first time that it's actually been tested to the point where it's been codified that, yeah, the president has pretty much complete and total wide-ranging immunity, just so long as they're doing whatever is in official capacity. But you guys understand what this is completely incentivizing, right? This is incentivizing political violence and using that to attain political power and get your agenda forced through. Because once you have the actual office of the presidency, you can do whatever the fuck you want. So got to get the power, because once you get the power, you then effectively can just run ramshot over all your opponents, just say that they were traitors or whatever. I'm acting in official capacity, put them all fucking away in the gulag. Oh, he's immune. No, just acting in official capacity. It was get rid of the traitors. What can you do? Oh God, what a disaster. And the worst thing about this ruling is that even if we get rid of Trump, defeat Trump, that's not going to stop the next right-wing populist from looking at this pathway that Trump has already cut, looking at the powers that have now been established by the Supreme Court and saying, hey, I can do this and I can do it better than Trump did and use these powers more effectively to gain my own political ends. It's, there's no other way to say it. It's a fucking total and utter train wreck for American democracy. This effectively means that American democracy doesn't even really exist. Of course, this Supreme Court decision is between the liberal and conservative justices, cut right down on partisan lines. But with this Supreme Court, what can you do? It just seems like they have effectively it seems like they will effectively vote with Trump on any single issue given to them, that they're going to vote with him. He appointed 3 of the 9 justices, and the other ones that he didn't appoint are ideological allies. It's just like it's so obvious that the left, whatever you want to consider the left to be, needs a strong and clear vision to combat this. They need to come out and say, the only way we're going to defeat the Supreme Court is we got to pack the court. We got to pack it. We got to neuter it. We got to do something, because it's got way too much power right now. And it can effectively run roughshod through the entire American system and cripple it at the knees if they so choose. Anyway, that's pretty much all I got to say about American politics. In fact, maybe even by the time you see this episode tomorrow, who knows, Joe could have actually withdrawn. There is a whole ton of pressure on him right now. I think his position is pretty indefensible. I don't know how he's going to manage to weather this storm with people in his party, key figures in his party, basically questioning his capacity and his ability to rule. But in any case, we blew through that with less time than I thought it was going to take me. So I'm actually going to add in a quick bonus segment to the end of this episode and spend a little bit of time talking about the first round in the French legislative elections. We talked about in the last episode how Macron called a snap election right after his party's disastrous showing in the EU elections, and that election has crept up on us so quickly that they're already going through the first round. And I wanted to spend a little bit of time talking about it and how exactly the system works, because it's pretty weird and interesting. So let's go to the results here, because the thing is, this is not over yet. This is a weird system they have where there are 2 rounds of voting in the legislative elections. So in the first round, what you need is your party to gain above 50% to automatically cross that threshold and secure the seat for your party. However, if you don't get over that 50%, what happens is that you then move into the second round, and then all parties who got more than 12.5% of the vote will move on into the second round. Under most circumstances in French elections, this usually ends up limiting the second round to 2 candidates. And if there isn't 2 candidates, what generally ends up happening is that the third one will bow out in order to solidify the deal effectively, because they feel like they might not have much of a shot in winning. And usually there aren't really enough kind of 3-way races that this is a very difficult or time-consuming process. There's only maybe a handful of candidates that end up bowing out anyway. This time, everything has changed, because we have a somewhat tight 3-way race in between the top performing parties, We have the National Rally, which is Le Pen's party. They finished first with 33.15% of the vote. Behind them is the new left-wing coalition, the New Popular Front. They finished with 28% of the vote. And then lastly, we have Macron's Ensemble with 21.27% of the vote. That middle part is the real silver lining for me out of this election, which doesn't have many things to be happy about, but I am happy that the left-wing coalition came together in basically less than a couple weeks, came together, formed a cohesive party, and ended up doing a very good job in challenging Le Pen. They only fell short by 5 points, which is extremely good for a party which only just came into existence a couple weeks ago. For Macron, on the other hand, this is a total collapse, total disaster, finishing in third place, not just behind the dreaded French rally, but behind a far-left socialist-leaning coalition. Behind them even is the fucking Ensemble. You obviously shit the bed here, Macron. I don't know what you were thinking calling this election. And now going into the second round and runoffs, it looks like his party is poised to do extremely poorly. I'm just going to move my head here. There we go. All right. And anyway, so we can see by this graph here, what it's showing us is not necessarily who won the seats, but what the upcoming runoffs are going to be. And right now, there are even some four-way runoffs. That must be a new in French politics. But the overwhelming result is NFP, which is the New Popular Front, Ensemble, and Rally runoffs, dwarfing all other choices. And then the LR, I can't remember exactly what they stand for, but they're like the old conservative party, the old conservative French party, who is effectively dead at this point. And then as we go through the tiers, we can see that most of the two-way races are happening between the Popular Front and Rally, and then only a few between Rally and Ensemble, and then going on, and at the bottom there you have directly elected candidates. And moving into the directly elected column, we even have more good news for the New Popular Front, as they were able to be directly elected in 32 seats, only 6 behind the Rally, which got 38 seats, and fucking Macron only managed to squeeze out 2. The second round only happens a week later. Within a couple days, we will know where exactly all the cards lie. The big question is what is going to happen with a lot of these three-way races. The Popular Front has already come out and said that they will withdraw candidates where they are facing the National Rally and came in third place. They are saying to Ensemble, we are going to withdraw our candidates because we want to have a better chance in diluting the rally's power. As of recording right now, Macron has made no such promises in reverse, so we shall see what ends up happening there. But again, that is the real hinge point factor of who is going to come out on top of this election coming up at the end of the week. Is Macron and Ensemble going to bow out, or are they going to try and run and get as many candidates as they can? We shall see, but what looks to be on track to happen is going to be a Rally minority in the legislative. Right now, there is a question whether or not they can achieve a majority. We shall see, but that's going to be my assumption is what's going to shake out when everything's said and done. And with that, we can bring ourselves to the end of this episode. Nice and brisk one today, but it hasn't exactly been a week of a lot of good news, which is unfortunate, but what can you do? You can't win them all. Anyway, with that, this has been the Comrade, signing off for now. Until next time, you guys take care.